Since the dawn of human consciousness, we have been haunted and inspired by the concept of death. The inevitability of it, the mystery that shrouds it, and the fragile line between what ends and what begins. In the middle of this existential terror, one symbol has burned brighter than most across the ashes of history: the phoenix. A bird that dies, only to rise again. A creature of fire, of transformation, of eternal return. But the phoenix is more than just a myth. It is a mirror, reflecting our deepest hopes, our pain, our resilience, our hunger to begin again no matter how many times we fall. And its story is not confined to one land, one people, one belief system. It is universal. It is immortal. It is human. Long before it became a fantasy motif or a tattoo on someone's back, the phoenix lived in the myths of ancient Egypt. There, it was called the Bennu. It perched upon the sacred obelisk of Heliopolis, the city of the sun, where it cried out to Ra, the god of the sun, at the first light of every new day. The Bennu was believed to have emerged from the primordial waters of chaos. It wasn't just a bird, it was the essence of creation itself. It did not just live, it initiated life. It was the heartbeat of resurrection. And every 500 years, when it felt its time had come, it built a nest of fragrant branches and spices, set itself ablaze, and was consumed. But from the pile of ash, it rose anew. Not weaker, not wounded, but renewed, magnificent, reborn. The Egyptians didn't merely revere the phoenix as a mythological creature. They saw it as the embodiment of the sun's cycle, of kingship, of time itself restarting, but the story didn't end there. As empires rose and fell, the phoenix flew across cultures. The Greeks took notice of the Egyptian Bennu and called it phoenix, associating it with the word for crimson or purple, the color of royalty and fire. Herodotus wrote of this bird that came from Arabia, lived for centuries, and when it died, its offspring would encase its father's body in myrrh and carry it to Heliopolis, returning to the birthplace. The Greek philosophers, always searching for meaning in nature, saw the phoenix not as just a fable but as a metaphor for the cyclical nature of the cosmos, the eternal return, the regeneration of all matter. The Stoics saw it as proof that destruction could not be final, that fire was not only an end but a beginning. The Romans took the symbolism further. In an empire obsessed with power and eternity, the phoenix became a symbol of Rome itself, indestructible, destined to rise even after being burned by war or rebellion. Coins minted in the late empire bore its image. Emperors likened their reigns to the phoenix, hinting that their legacies would outlive the flesh. In fact, the first Christian Roman emperor, Constantine, used the phoenix as a symbol of Christ's resurrection, merging pagan and Christian symbology into a powerful fusion. For early Christians, already obsessed with martyrdom, suffering, and eternal life, the phoenix offered a poetic representation of Christ dying and rising on the third day. It allowed new converts to connect with the story through a myth they already knew and felt deep within. The phoenix wasn't confined to the Mediterranean. In ancient Persia, the Simurgh echoed similar themes. This bird lived for centuries and was said to possess all the knowledge of the world. It healed, it resurrected, it was the bringer of justice and wisdom. In Chinese mythology, the Feng Huan, often wrongly conflated with the phoenix but equally powerful, symbolized balance between yin and yang, the male and female forces. Though it didn't burn itself to death, its appearance was always associated with the arrival of peace, prosperity, and renewal. Its presence was rare, sacred, and transformative. So why does this myth repeat across civilizations so vastly different in geography and belief? Why does every culture seem to invent its own version of the phoenix? Maybe because the myth touches on something primal. Because every civilization has faced catastrophe. Every human has known loss. And within each culture and each individual, there exists a need to believe that from the ruin, something greater can be born. The phoenix tells us that destruction is not the end. It is merely a stage in the eternal process of becoming. Throughout history, even when people didn't speak of the phoenix directly, they lived by its code. The city of London, burned to the ground by the Great Fire of 1666, rebuilt itself stronger, and even placed the phoenix atop some of its reconstructed buildings as a silent promise of survival. Hiroshima, after being decimated by nuclear fire, was reborn as a symbol of peace. People tattoo the phoenix on their bodies after surviving cancer, abuse, addiction, or grief. The phoenix is not just a myth, they are walking among us, speaking with our voices, breathing with our lungs. Every refugee who starts anew in a foreign land. Every artist who creates after being rejected. Every heart that loves again after being broken. They are all phoenixes. The beauty of the phoenix myth lies not in its magic, but in its realism. The burn is real. The pain is real. The death, the ending, the crumbling of all that once gave us meaning, these things happen. They are not illusions. The phoenix does not avoid the fire. It flies directly into it. And that is its power. Not the avoidance of suffering, but the acceptance of it as a necessary gateway to something greater. It does not fear death, because it knows death is not the opposite of life, but part of its cycle. The myth has evolved with us. In modern times, the phoenix has appeared in literature, in films, in politics. When France needed a symbol of hope after war, it invoked the phoenix. When revolutionaries of all kinds spoke of new worlds, they echoed its spirit. In the world of fantasy, from Dumbledore's companion in Harry Potter to Jean Grey's fiery transformation in X-Men, the phoenix continues to mesmerize and inspire. Not because of what it is, but because of what it says. It whispers the message that every generation needs to hear in its own language: you can begin again. Even now. Especially now, the phoenix challenges the idea that we are trapped by our past, by our failures, by our pain. It dares us to imagine a life beyond the wreckage. Not a return to what was, but the birth of something entirely new. The phoenix is not nostalgia. It does not long for the ashes. It rises from them, but it never looks back. And that is perhaps its greatest lesson. That rebirth is not about restoration. It is about transformation. You do not become who you were. You become someone you never imagined you could be. In the ruins of our personal tragedies, we don't often see the seeds of rebirth. In the ashes of betrayal, of failure, of heartbreak, we feel only the suffocation of loss. But the phoenix teaches us that from that very desolation, from that precise moment when everything has been taken, the possibility of becoming something greater is born. And it's not immediate. The flames hurt. The burning is slow. The death of the old self is terrifying. But somewhere deep within that pain, the embers of transformation begin to glow. Not because of magic, but because of choice. Because the human spirit, like the phoenix, was never meant to remain buried beneath the ashes. It was built to rise. Throughout time, philosophers, poets, and mystics have returned to the phoenix as a symbol not just of renewal, but of awakening. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, saw the phoenix as an archetype of the self, an inner symbol of the integrated being, born from the death of the ego. Alchemists, in their cryptic diagrams and mystic language, referred to the phoenix as the key to the magnum opus, the great work of turning base matter into gold, not literal gold, but the elevation of the soul through the fire of inner trials. In this way, the phoenix has been more than a myth. It has been a map, a spiritual blueprint, a guide for how to endure the deaths we all must face and emerge not ruined, but refined. And consider this, every major rite of passage in human culture echoes this same pattern. Initiation rituals often involve symbolic death, whether through isolation, challenge, deprivation, or pain. The initiate must let go of who they were in order to become who they must be. Shamans in tribal cultures often undergo a symbolic death before returning as healers. Monks renounce the world, die to desire, and are reborn in silence. The hero of every great story faces the moment of crisis, enters the underworld, and returns not unchanged, but transformed. These stories endure not because they entertain us, but because they remind us of something sacred that lives within us, the capacity to break and still build again. And maybe that's the real truth behind the phoenix myth. It was never about an actual bird. It was about us. It was always about us. About how we suffer. About how we endure. About how we take the fire and let it burn away everything we thought we were, so we can discover what we're truly meant to become. That fire could be a loss. A war. A disease. A moment when your life fell apart so completely you no longer recognized your own reflection. And still, somehow, you stood. Shaking, yes. But standing. And in that standing, you began to rise. The myth remains because we need it. Because we are always rebuilding. As individuals. As families. As nations. As a species. We are always caught between collapse and renewal, between ruin and resurrection. Whether it's the fall of empires or the rebuilding of cities after earthquakes or bombs, the human story is a constant rhythm of ending and beginning again. And the phoenix watches over this rhythm. It watches in silence, not judging the fall, but waiting for the moment when we dare to rise. Even in our most modern, most advanced expressions of culture, the phoenix persists. It appears in mental health movements, where people who face depression and trauma speak openly of their rebirth into stronger, more authentic versions of themselves. It lives in recovery communities, where addicts describe the brutal burning away of false identities and the slow, painful rise into a life of clarity. It is tattooed onto the skin of people who have survived abuse, accidents, prison, grief. Its wings are inked not because they are pretty, but because they are true. And if you listen carefully, in every inspirational story ever told, every comeback, every redemption, every journey from rock bottom to triumph, you will hear the echo of the phoenix's cry. It is the sound of hope. Of defiance. Of sacred rebellion against despair. It does not say that pain won't come. It does not promise comfort. It says only this: you will rise. There is something deeply sacred about this pattern, something cosmic. Even stars obey it. A star dies in a supernova, and from its remains, new stars and planets are born. From the death of a star, life is made possible. We are, quite literally, made from the ashes of stars. Every atom in your body was forged in the fire of a cosmic death. So the phoenix is not myth. It is physics. It is the truth of our very selves. Death feeds life. Destruction opens the door to creation. We are not separate from this cycle. We are this cycle. In a world addicted to beginnings, to youth, to winning, the phoenix invites us to honor the end. To respect the fall. To give space to the burn. And then, when the time is right, to gather ourselves from the rubble, not to rebuild what was, but to birth something no one has seen before. A self no one expected. A life completely your own. It is no accident that people facing terminal illness or unimaginable tragedy often speak of clarity, of purpose, of finally knowing who they are. When everything is stripped away, what remains is what matters. And from that place, the rise is not an act of ambition. It is an act of truth. The phoenix rises not to prove anything, not to gain approval, but because rising is what it was born to do. And so are we. So if you find yourself broken, lost, burned to the ground, let the myth of the phoenix remind you that this is not the end. It might be the most important part of your story. The part where the old life ends, and the true life begins. The fire is not your enemy. It is your womb. It is your forge. It is your passageway to a self you could not become in any other way. In every ending, the phoenix sees a beginning. In every loss, it sees a lesson. In every tear, it sees water that feeds new growth. This is not toxic positivity. This is not denial of pain. This is alchemy. This is transformation through truth. Through fire. Through courage. So take the ashes. Gather them. Feel them. And then, when you are ready, rise. Not as who you were, but as who you must become. Because that is the way of the phoenix. And it has always been the way of the human soul.